This episode of the Misdirected Mark podcast is brought to you by Wayward Masquerade and Dragon Baggins.
This is the Misdirected Mark podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
So, I jump in front of the computer and click a few keys and start the show, right?
Not exactly. You're going to need to make a roll in order to start the show.
Seriously? I mean, I've started the show dozens and dozens of times. Why do I have to make a roll now?
Well, you're not wrong. You have done it tons of times, but in the past 3 weeks, you haven't recorded from inside the house misdirected, and this is your first week back, so there's still a chance that this could still go wrong.
Fine. But since I have to run the show here before I can get a bonus, can I have that bonus? Oh, and can I have Bob helping? So can I get an extra die for the assist?
Yeah, it sounds reasonable. Go ahead, roll.
Fantastic. I'm gonna use my virtual die roller. It sounds like this. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, I wanted to hit the electricity thing, but I took it off just for you, Phil. Damn it. My die roll sounds like this now. Success!
All right. Good. All right, then the show's going to successfully start, but why don't you narrate your success? Tell me what happens.
Fine. Okay, it goes something like this. And welcome to episode 278 of the Misdirected Mark podcast. Tonight, we will hit the garage and talk about when you make a roll in a game. And then we will hit up social media and find out what's going on in the gaming world. But for now, my name is Chris.
And I'm Phil.
And I'm Old Man Logan.
Oh my God, it's the crew. We're here. We're in the basement.
I feel like we should be just playing like Back in the Saddle, right?
Back in the saddle again.
Like we're back in the house misdirected. Like we're back.
I enjoyed our
road trip.
Our road trip.
Yeah, we were on a road trip for
fun,
like 3 weeks.
but
it was
it's
good.
also nice to be home.
Yeah.
So before we get into what's going on and whatnot, I have a job. I got a new job.
Can I pause you for
Sure.
1 second? So first of all, can we just thank our gracious hostess, Nikki, who for 3 weeks put up with not only us recording in her house, but also stashing all of our gear.
Yeah,
That's true.
In her place. So
Yes,
she was
thank you so much, Nikki. It was
Yes,
greatly
thank you very
appreciated.
much.
You're
She was-
pretty awesome.
Yep, she was fantastic and quite gracious to let us record out of there. And we did 3 weeks, and now we're back. And so yes, thank you very much, Nikki. Now,
And by pretty awesome, I mean exceptionally awesome.
well, there you go. Don't mince your words, man.
I do that all the time. That's why I try not to.
I know. So do it.
I guess I'll do what's going on with me first. So what's going on
with Chris?
Chris, I got a new job.
Yeah, you did.
So
Yeah.
I don't know exactly when I start. I'll be I'm doing the cleaning thing again, but I got a pretty good deal because of my experience from previous, so I took that job. And there may be some shifts in the recording schedule possibly in the future because my job requires me to be at work at 5 a.m., which means I have to get up at 3:45.
Yeah, so we don't quite know yet. We're going to feel some things out.
Yeah.
But what we are going to do is try to give everyone a big on-ramp if
Uh-huh.
we are going to subtly change times.
Yeah,
or
it'll be tweeted out all over the place and messaged out, and everybody will
we'll
know.
give you guys some advance notice.
Bump up the.
Pump up the volume.
Pump up the volume. What for the
Everybody says it's quiet.
Give me 1 second. I gotta go to the
He's got to go to the Twitch.
Yeah, here, everybody. That should be a lot better. In fact, that might be
There.
too loud. In fact, that'll probably be better.
There we go. Okay. So anyway, we don't really know all the details, but you're going to figure it out, and when you do, we'll let everyone know what's going on.
And just for you folks, if it takes me a couple of weeks or 3 weeks to get this whole thing situated, I will just not sleep as much. I mean, I can just go home and sleep in the afternoon for a little while anyway. But Tuesdays are tough because like I have to go get my kid. So I mean, there's that too. Like I don't have a lot of time between work and going to get Alex. So we'll figure something out.
We will figure it out.
Okay. Other things that have been going on with me. I was at Buffalo Comic Con this weekend, and I was working for Collectors Inn, and we're just demoing board games for people the entire weekend, which was really fun because these games were not complicated games; these were very simple games in a lot of cases. I ran Spinderella, which is this. It's roll and move, but it's an interesting roll and move because when you roll, you're rolling 3 dice, and there's a symbol on one of them that is either an ant, a spider, or a leaf symbol. And when you roll the ant symbol, you have to move your ants the number that's on the brown die. If you roll the spider symbol, you get to move these spiders, which are attached to magnets, and the spiders hanging off of them underneath this board.
Sweet.
So what you're trying to do is you're moving the spiders on the magnets around to drop the other spider to pick up ants.
Oh, that's.
Because then it's got that sorry mechanic where when you get somebody, they go back to the beginning.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but also
Because I love that mechanic.
Yeah, I obviously hate that mechanic. Unfortunately, the game is super short. So, but when you do that, you also get to move your ant. So if you catch a ant, you get to move your ants, the brown die.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then the leaf is a wild card where there's like this. It's like a tree stump that you can move around on the board, which makes the space one higher up, so it's easier to catch ants off of it. Also, you can cover other people's ants. So if you cover other people's ants, they can't move their ants anymore, but they're protected. And then it's wild card too, so you can either move the spiders or the ants. So you can combo it up, moving the thing to capture to screw somebody over there, moving the spiders around to catch an ant, and then moving your ants if you're clever enough. So that's Spinnerella. It was really fun. This game is called Ice Cool. This next one I'm talking about, it's awesome. So what you are is you're penguins running around a school trying to catch fish while somebody is like the hall monitor trying to catch you. So it's a dexterity game where you are flicking these things through doorways on this cardboard board, and one person is trying to flick their meeple thing into you, and the rest of you are trying to flick your meeple things through doorways that have these fish to score points.
I'm looking at it right now. It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty fun.
Oh, and what's nice is the board actually has walls. Because that's way better.
You're supposed to ricochet that sucker.
Yeah, well, but that's way better than what's the one? I have two of them.
You have Flick 'em Up.
I have Flick 'em Up, and I have Terra Meepleville.
Terra Meeple City, which was formerly called Rampage before IP.
It's actually Rampage on my box.
Yeah.
But either case, the meeples always just go like shooting off the table because somebody gets like super overzealous.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is kind of nice in that it's like better contained. I'm looking at pictures of it on Board Game Geek.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's cool.
I learned how to play a game called Spellcaster, which is like a magic thingy, but it's really fun. It's actually super simple. Bob, you'll appreciate this. So there's like 4 boards in front of you, like little boards that you put the cards in, and there's 4 colors of cards. Now, when you play a card, it's facing you. If it's facing you, then you can use it, but people play cards on top of that. So then when somebody plays a card on top of it, it's facing them, and then they can use it, but you can't. So
cool.
That's what the play is, and you're either trying to collect 15 blue gems through the cards, the powers in the cards, or deplete your opponent's energy, which is you start with 10 yellow gems. And the game is super cool because you start your turn by drawing a card, and then you get to take 2 actions. And those 2 actions are either play a card, draw a card, or activate a card. So you can't just, like, there's some really cool play in that game. It's a really fascinating game. I like it a lot. I learned how to and taught people how to play Lift It. That's the game where you have the crane and you're trying to build stuff.
Yeah, I'm totally looking at it right
it's
now.
super fun. It's really hard. It's a lot harder than you think it is.
Yep, there's a crane, all right.
Clask is amazing.
Oh, the crane is on your head?
Sometimes. There are some spaces that the crane is on your head.
Oh,
That's hard.
That's wicked.
Yeah, and it's a game where you only have a certain amount of time to do it. Like there's a timer that's 40 seconds. I'll talk about Class in a second, but Lift It, you're trying to build things off of cards, and you just have to make it look like a card. And if you build enough pieces, if you finish the card, you get a point for every piece. If you don't, you just get a point for every piece. But if you finish the card, you get a point for every piece plus 4 bonus points. And that's how many spaces you move around the board. Whoever gets around the board first wins. And then there's challenge cards where you're actually racing to see who can get a thing done first. And there's the Lift It off your head. If you're playing with teams, there's some that you have to actually explain to the person what to build instead of actually being able to look at it. Nice. So that's that game. Like I said, a lot of simple stuff. Clask is an amazing game.
Clask, it's wicked looking.
So Clask is it's like a little mini. It looks like a little mini air hockey table in a ways. And what you do is you have your hitter that's on top, and then you have a magnet underneath, and that's magnetized that you use to move around. And you're basically knocking this ball back and forth, trying to score goals. There's like a little circle that you're trying to put the ball into. Mm-hmm. Now, what makes the game fascinating is if you there's 3 magnets in the middle that get set up. If you happen to get 2 of those magnets on your piece, your opponent scores a point. So you're trying to avoid the magnets, knock the ball into their hole, and not lose control of your thing. Because if you lose control of your thing, or you drop your hitter, I guess it's the best way to call it, into your like goal, or it just goes off and you don't have it anymore, the other person gets a point. And you play to 6. So it's super fun. I really wanted to buy it. It's like $50. Maybe in a couple of weeks I'll pick a copy of it up because it's really, really fun.
Cool.
There's this game I could play called Hearts of Attraction. It's like 13 magnets that are heart shaped. You throw them on the board, spread them all out, and the gameplay is you pick a magnet up that is your magnet, and then you toss it on the board and try to get as many other magnets to stick to it.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, pretty good time. Played some Giant Jenga. We were playing. I was playing Giant Jenga with these 2 this lovely couple that were cosplaying Mort and I can't. I don't know the name of the cartoon. I'm just blanking on me. Anyways, we got that tower way up. Like there was a point in time. Oh, when the thing fell over, like we were trying to pull blocks, and like there was one of those places where the blocks were like the X square thing, like they're just an X there. The guy who pulled the block that knocked the tower off, he turned the tower so that the blocks were lined back up, and then he pulled it out. And he got it, and then he put it on top, and that's when it toppled over.
Nice. By the way, that's Rick and Morty.
Rick and Morty. Thank you.
No, thank Josh.
Thank you, Josh. And then we played Happy Salmon. I got to play Happy Salmon for the first time. That game is fun as heck. For those who don't know what Happy Salmon is, you have 12 cards, and they have 4 things on them. They have Pound It, Happy Salmon, Switcheroo, and High Five. And what you're trying to do is you flip the card over and you start saying the thing. And then you're trying to find somebody else at the table who's got the same thing as you. And then you do it with them, and then you can discard your card. But you have to do the thing, too. So, like, the Happy Salmon is where you put your hands on their forearm, you slap it 3 times. It's so bizarre, right? The Switcheroo, you actually have to run around the table, like with the person.
Nice.
Yeah, and then the High Five is obvious, and the fist bump is obvious. And you're just playing to see who can get rid of their cards first.
Can I ask you a question? How did we not have this game in Mexico?
I don't know.
Because this game would have
Happy
been,
Salmon
my
would have been the
God.
best thing ever.
We would have been a disaster.
Oh, it would have been hilarious.
Uh-huh.
We could have just played it at the bar, so it would have been fine. Like, or at a table near the bar. That way, if we spilled drinks, it wouldn't have been so bad.
Spilled drinks. I'm worried about spilling me. Like reverse-a-roo, bonk, Phil falls over.
So I played all these games. I think Spinnerella is really good for kids. Ice Cool is fun for anybody. I figured out how to make a drinking game out of that already. Spellcaster, if you want something that's magic light. Lifted is seems like a blast too. Classic, I want to buy super bad. Happy Salmon, I want to buy super bad. Like those 2 games are games I want in my collection.
Yeah, Happy Salmon looks good.
All right, so that's what's going on with me. I know what's going on with me this week. I get to go to the Sabres home opener on Thursday. I'm pretty excited about
Yeah,
that.
that's nice.
Yeah, but
They might even win.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm gonna well, maybe not. Montreal's really good. I'm gonna kick it over to Bob. Bob, what's going on with you?
Hey, it's like, yeah, I did not have a good week last week with my second week of night shift. Thankfully, it was only a 2-week stint. But I didn't have a good week sleep-wise, and then my transition over the weekend was terrible. I did not get the sleep that I needed to roll back around. So I called in sick on Monday and slept. I ended up sleeping 14 hours on Monday. It was ridiculous. But in the interim there, Sunday morning hanging out with Phil and Glenn.
We totally didn't play anything.
We were going to play Swords Without Master, and then we just kind of sat there and chatted and talked about geek shit and stuff like that. And that was good. We had a good time.
That's actually a lot of fun.
Yep. And then Blades in the Dark on Sunday night, which was equally as fun. And we had a good heist that Phil can talk about more. And yeah, now I'm doing the back in the office thing and starting cross training technically tomorrow for some more stuff. And it's going to be loads of fun for the next 8 weeks. Yeah.
There you go.
What about you, Phil?
Well, I think a lot of people saw last week. I had kind of a rough week in the middle. So actually, I want to thank a number of people, like a whole bunch of people, especially from the chat room, kind of reached out to me by Wednesday and Thursday to see if I was doing okay. And I am. I'm actually doing pretty good now. So thank you for the support. I had a little bachelor time Friday into Saturday. The kids and Florence were away at a Taekwondo tournament. And so I did a little cooking for myself, and I picked up some mochi and some Stumptown coffee at Whole Foods and chilled mostly. Took it pretty easy, actually. Took it pretty easy all weekend. I really didn't do any game design work. I actually watched some TV. I actually took like some real... I took some real downtime, actually. Something I haven't done in quite some time. And my mochi was delicious, so that was even better. I picked some random mochis out of the bin, but the salted caramel mochi was ridiculous. And then the red bean one was so-so, and the other ones were pretty good. But the salted caramel one, oof. Anyway, did that. Hung out with you Sunday morning, you and Glenn. That was a ton of fun. Totally nerded out and just talked about all sorts of random geek stuff, which was really good. And then we played Blades, and we played this fantastic heist in Blades. And Tony was pretty adamant what he wanted, and I was like, I think this works with the rules of the game. Let's make it happen and see what happens. So what Tony wanted was they were doing a claim grab, and they wanted to acquire an informant network, and the target of it was this guy who basically ran like the Teamsters, the UPS, for the docks, the Cartage Guild, we called them.
Yep.
So Tony was like, I want to open the scene where he's tied to a chair and we're going to come in and negotiate with him. And then we're going to do a bunch of flashbacks. And I was like, all right, like, let's make it happen. So we did, and it was really good. It was a social negotiation. And the flashbacks were that shortly after the crew had kidnapped the guy, your character, Bob Hicks, and Milos, Tony's character, went in and ransacked the guy's house for blackmail information. And so every time we got to an impasse in the game, Tony was like, time for another flashback. We ransack the room for another piece of information, or this specific piece of information. And we just did that back and forth, and it played out this very non-linear heist job. I should say the correct term for the score, actually, is the correct term for that game. It played this very non-linear score that felt very much like a TV show, because by the time we got to the end of it, we had discovered through flashback everything that happened before it. It was really neat. Like, I thought it actually came out really well, and it got a little tense because there were a couple clocks on the thing, and Bob got a little busted up at one point, and the guys ran high on stress. So I think it did exactly what I wanted it to do, but I was really impressed. Tony was pretty adamant about how he wanted that scene to go, and we were actually able to make it happen in a way that felt very TV at the same time. So I was digging it, and I feel like I'm getting my Blades legs, like I'm getting more comfortable, like knowing where all the rules are. I still don't like the organization at times of the book, but I now know where to find stuff, and I'm getting more comfortable about knowing like when to use certain rules and things like that. So pretty pleased with that. I got like two more things I want to mention real quick.
Do it up.
I listened to Zhang Hustle.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Right?
That was excellent episode. I was just at the part, I'm like 2/3 of the way in, and I'm like, all right, are these guys going to talk about mechanical stuff? And they're like, okay, well, now that we've talked about the movies a bunch, let's talk about gamification of it. I'm like, yes, like thoroughly enjoyed the episode. If you haven't listened to it,
Twice on the feed.
If you haven't listened to it, please go download it if you like martial arts at all. It was excellent. I'm excited, and if those guys actually really do want to make a game out of the stuff they're talking about on the show, I would also be willing to throw in and help publish said game, because the stuff they're talking about design-wise is scratching all my itches. So anyway, I like that. And then finally, I think we need to take a moment and pause. Rob Abrazato
God, my throat
has no beard.
Can I say a thing real quick?
Yes.
So I saw that today, and I was like, and the first thing I was like, Nikki, how come Rob doesn't have a beard on his face or any hair on his head?
Yeah.
And Nikki was like, I saw that yesterday. I'm like, why didn't you tell me?
I know, like there's none. He's smooth.
It's gone.
Smooth.
It's gone.
Yeah. It was very smooth. It was. It took a moment. I don't know about you, but I took a moment to collect myself.
I had to.
Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly what was going on. I read the post then.
Yeah.
Then I did.
process it at first. I'm like, what?
So what Rob's actually doing is he's part of the Humanity Project Season 2, which I believe Kate Bullock is kind of like the head of all that good stuff. And his thing as part of it was he was going to answer questions every day. So a bunch of people started asking him questions. So I encourage you to go to Facebook, find the post, and ask Rob a bunch of personal questions, because that's what he asked for.
Yes.
So like for me, for instance, the first thing I asked him, which I'm not sure he's going to answer it, but I mean, if he doesn't, that's okay. I was like, as a human being, what is your greatest flaw or failing, and how do you plan on correcting that in the future? Because I ain't coming easy.
Well, You're going to ask for the feels. Chris is going to go for the feels. But anyway, I think we all took a little bit to get accustomed to it. I mean, I had to like send the picture to Senda, like, have you seen this? Like, there was a thing. It happened. It was an event.
And I have to point out that while he was shaving, he was thinking of me shaving my head.
That's
in
true.
the not too distant future.
Oh man, I can't wait. I can't wait. The clippers are ready, man. I'm going to practice. I don't know how I'm going to practice yet, but I'm going to practice. Anyway, so we're all okay. Rob's okay. He looks good, right?
Yep.
He looks good. I mean, I'm a little not used to it, right? Because Rob had like like that cool
Yeah,
beard, right?
it's a system shock. You're
Yeah.
like, what?
But he still looks good. He looks good without the beard. Okay. Anyway, just wanted to bring that up because as part of the misdirected mark community, we can't let things like that go by. All right. So that's about it. Chris, you want to do any announcements?
Yeah, I do actually. We should
Okay.
probably do some announcements. Lizard King is on sale. The Lizard King is now AL legal. If you're an AL player,
What?
you can pick up the Lizard King and play it as an AL adventure. Please go buy it. I mean, it's already selling like crazy again, so thank you for
Yeah,
making it AL
absolutely.
legal. I greatly appreciate that. Another few things that are going on. It feels like that we have Love and Justice in layout and arting for it and all that good stuff. Whirlwind Millionaires in layout and such. So it'll be up on drive-through cards pretty soon. I'm very excited about that. Are there any other games and things like that we can talk about?
No, but let's just say that we're putting a contract together for another thing that's coming down the pike. I mean, that thing is actually set. I guess we could talk about it. It's going to happen.
Which thing?
Tales.
Oh yeah, Tales of the Skalds.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that for a
So
second?
Tales of the Skalds is a bunch of short stories and essays that go along with Iron Edda, and the text is all done. We are getting art for it pretty soon, and then we are going to put that together and sell that sucker. Right? Like that's the idea.
We are. It was originally. Sorry, fumbled my way through that.
Misdirected, Mark.
Word scramble.
Thank you.
It was originally part of a Kickstarter, so Kickstarter backers will be getting it as soon as it gets put together, and then we'll be putting it on sale for the general public. So, that's a thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. That is totally a thing. I guess that's everything then, right? That's all the announcements I have.
I feel like that's good, right?
I agree. Let us move on to an advertisement. Mount Tongariro is a compound volcano in the topovolcanic zone of the North Island of New Zealand. It's here we go to on this day to continue our exploration of the mythical and yet all too real Dragon Baggins.
The volcanic rocks of Mount Tongariro are an excellent resource to create the dice within the Dragon Baggins.
You can find the Dragon Baggins, and it's where we found Charlotte, the Dragon Baggin you've seen in so many pictures, near any of the 12 cones of Tongariro. Charlotte was feeding on the lava of Nagaroha, the most active of the vents, and oftentimes thought to be a separate mountain.
The Dragon Baggins love this area for the extreme heat being thrown off the vents, allowing them to catch the rising heat winds and soar into the skies above.
You can see them flying to and fro between the vents, dipping and diving in a kind of dance with each other.
A flock of Dragon Baggins is surely a thing to be seen, but beware, you don't want to get caught under a flock of them if they've just had a meal of volcanic rock.
The heat from the dice they'll forge in their bellies will badly burn anyone or anything up to a minute after they've been regurgitated from the Dragon Baggins' bellies.
Although the pouring of the volcanic dice from their bellies as they fly between the vents is one of the most awe-inspiring and beautiful moments one can see in this life.
During these flights, you can often see the mating ritual of the Dragon Baggins being performed, which has much to do with diving out of the sky as a pair, coming close to the ground, and then swooping up at the last second together to avoid smashing into the ground.
Once that is done, the Dragon Baggins are mated and stay together for life.
All information about Dragon Baggins in this ad may or may not be fictional, but we can say for sure that Dragon Baggins are coming to Kickstarter this month from Wayward Masquerade. I also, once again, had a lovely chat with Bridget, which we recorded, and will be coming out as an episode of The Lounge. She was one of my favorite interviews ever, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you all. Look for that sometime in the next 7 days. It'll definitely be up and out. And with that, we will move on.
Access granted.
So, we're talking about when to roll. This topic, as with so many others, came up during the middle of a recent show, when we were talking about the differences with how rolls are made in games like Pathfinder versus Dungeon World. Then we went back and discussed the idea among ourselves and found 2 different directions that we might want to take a look at. Phil, what was the first one?
Yeah, so the first one is the one we're actually going to talk about tonight, which is the influence of when a roll is called for or made in an RPG.
Yeah, and the second was on setting stakes, and we liked that so much that, Bob, please put a pin in that.
Ding.
and we'll get back to that in the future.
Yeah.
So tonight,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. So tonight we're going to look at a procedure that you may not think about too much: who or what controls when to roll the dice.
Yeah. So, Chris, let's get into it. What's the deal with rolling dice in terms of like the overall flow of the game? What
Misdirected, Mark. Word scramble.
I know it's twice for me, and normally I don't hit the word scramble. I'm just like a bag of ums.
Yeah, it's usually me and Bob that
I know.
word scramble.
Sorry about that. Maybe it's the coffee. I should be drinking coffee on the show, but no, that doesn't seem right. I drink coffee on the show all the time.
That's true.
Anyway, Chris, what's the deal with this? We roll dice all the time in the game. Why is this even a big deal?
Yeah, so this is something that we've talked about in past episodes, the idea of switching from narrative to mechanics and back. What we see in the game is something like this. We're playing the game. It's a narrative scene. So, Bob, Phil, you're in a dungeon. You are playing yourselves. You're with Adnap. You are moving along this dungeon trying to find out what happened to Chris because he's been kidnapped.
Yes.
You are currently in a room with a bunch of lanterns hanging from the ceiling, and they have lights in them, which are fairies. What do you do?
Yeah. I think we're gonna first look around. I would like to look around. I think I want to just kind of get like a feel for what's going on in here.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And now I'm going to stop you for a second because in many games, but not all, we will talk about a few exceptions in a minute. We reach a point where the outcome of an action is not certain and a roll is required. So now we will continue playing the scene until that happens.
Okay.
All right. So you're looking around?
Yeah. So I think what I'm gonna do is are the lanterns low enough that I can look into them, or do I need to get up on Adnap?
You would need to get up on Adnap or on Bob. Adnap does not seem to be very interested in letting you climb on
Yeah,
them.
but I don't think Bob can hold me up. All right, but Bob could get on me.
Yeah,
I'll climb up
that might
on you.
work.
How's
Yeah.
that?
Okay. We'll switch up.
All right, so you climb up onto Phil's shoulders, and you can look inside, and there are fairies in there, and they're basically banging on the glass. One of them is banging on the glass, begging you to let them out.
Well, that seems cruel to have them trapped in the little glass chamber like that. So try and find a way to let them out.
Okay. What do you do exactly?
I'm gonna see if it unscrews or has some kind of way to open it.
Okay, so this is the part where I would make you make a roll, basically to determine how to get the fairy out of there. Like, what is the procedure, or if there's a trap or things like that, and then we would roll. So, this is when the game switches from narrative to a mechanism, and then we determine that outcome. Depending on the game, there will be rules or procedures for the mechanisms and how we decide to resolve the roll. In this case, we're playing World of Dungeons. It's just a 2d6.
Yep.
And let's say you roll. Let's say you get that 7 to 9, right?
7.
That's 7. Fantastic. So we go back to the narrative then of the game because I get to describe the outcome. So you start unscrewing. You see that you can totally unscrew the bottom. Like there's like a little lock there, but it's not that hard to pick. And you pick that lock. But as you're unscrewing the bottom of it, the thing that you're unscrewing, the cap starts glowing, which is your complication. And really what's going to happen is it's going to explode in about 10 seconds.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah, so what do you do?
Um,
By the way, you're on top of Phil's shoulder still.
yeah. Well, I don't know it's going to blow up, so it looks weird because it's glowing.
I'm actually telling you it's going to blow
Oh,
up
you're
because
telling me.
you're a wizard, so you
Okay.
would know.
Oh, well, there you go. Then once I pop the cap off to let the fairy out, I flicked the cap away quickly.
So that would be another roll of some sort. And we'll say that you succeed completely. So you flick it away. It hits the corner of the area. It explodes, which knocks you off of Phil, but Adnap catches you.
Whoa. Thanks for the catch, Adnap.
And the fairy is free. So that is the conclusion of that scene. So, look, on the surface, this seems like pretty basic stuff, but as we'll talk about shortly, how you determine the role has some impact on the flow of the game. Phil, now, can you please break it down and give some details of what is really going on after I hit this button?
Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. So in every game, there are rules for when you call for a roll. And to be clear, I'm saying roll out of convenience, but this could be drawing cards, pulling Jenga blocks, etc. Like whatever the randomizer
Whatever
is.
your randomizer
Yep.
or deterministic mechanism is.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that all night long. So we're going to say roll.
Sure.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Okay, so some games are going to have one rule for how to call for rolls. And these are games that tend to have really centralized mechanics, like one core mechanic thing. So like Lasers and Feelings has one roll. Like literally there's just, one way to make a roll in that game. And when it comes up, you do what, you follow the procedure and make the roll.
It's accurate.
Other games are going to have different rules for calling for different types of rolls. So like if we look at D&D, like a skill check, there's a particular trigger for when to make a skill check.
Strangely enough, it's the same as a lot of other games that we're used to.
Oh, it totally is. There's saving throws.
Yes. So there's different kinds of rolls.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah. There are different kinds of rolls, and then there are different triggers that tell you when to make those.
True facts.
Yes. Okay.
Which is strangely not too dissimilar from like Dungeon World.
A little bit. We're going to talk a little bit why Dungeon World falls into a slightly different category. And then, of course, if we're talking about different types of rolls, the attack rolls, like the third major type of roll.
It is. Those are, in fact, the 3 kinds of rolls that occur in Dungeons & Dragons.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So talking about that, there are actually 3 main ways that a roll gets called for in a game.
Sure. I'll start with the Game Master, okay? So this is the first one. The Game Master decides when in the narrative to call for the roll. They are in charge of listening to the narrative as it is being created and then decide if a roll is required. Often this is when they believe there is a chance for failure to occur. This is by far... I guess it's by far the most common one.
I mean, it
is the most commonly played one because D&D is the most popular game in the world, and this is that.
Right, but if you go from the 80s forward, the GM calling for a roll is by far the most common way.
Yes, and historically it is too.
Yeah.
So currently, yes, and historically, yes.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more games that do a lot more different things now.
That's what we're going to get into, right?
Yeah. So why don't you hit me with the next one, which is the mechanics?
Yeah, the next one is the mechanics of the game tells you when a roll is required. Now, this is very common when we talk about board games and war games, but we're not going to deal with those tonight. We're going to focus on RPGs, and there are RPGs where the mechanics determine when you make a roll and not any one of the participants. Mm-hmm. And in these cases, there's actually no choice among the participants when a roll is required. The game dictates it.
Yeah, this is often the attack roll and the saving throw from D&D. The game dictates when that roll is required.
Yep. And we'll talk about it in a few other places too.
And the last one is the player. The player is empowered to call for a roll. This is the most rare type of mechanisms in games, but it occurs more often in games with more shared narrative control. And we'll get into that and how that works in a bit. So where are we going now?
Yeah, so now that we understand a little bit about what's happening, like how this role is getting called for, let's take a look at a few games that, and we'll talk about ones that, we'll talk about one from each category. And
Sure.
I think 1 or 2 other ones.
I'm into it.
We'll throw in there some edge cases as well.
All right, so let's start with Pathfinder. So Pathfinder is GM driven and mechanical driven.
Yes.
Yeah. So the GM manages the narration in the game quite often, depending on how you're playing the game. But that is generally how the game works, and the GM generally has most of the narrative control in a lot of ways. They decide often when to call for a roll, but a lot of times the mechanics do that too. They also decide what the roll will be for. This is because they kind of move in that same space as D&D a lot of times. Like the climb check, they'll call for the roll, right? But the attack roll, they don't. The mechanics determine that, correct?
I'm going to say yes and no, because what if the case where the GM, let's say you say, I'll set up a scene for you.
Sure.
You are outside the king's chambers. The king is screaming because something monstrous is chewing on the king, and the possessed guards are blocking the door. And you roll up. I roll up. Okay. I roll up, and I'm like, I'm going to shove this guard out of the way. You could just say, you shove the guard out of the way and go in the room. Unless you say, nope, because there's nothing that specifically says in the rule in the game, you must make an attack roll when you put your hands on another NPC
That
or
is
a PC.
true. That could also just be an athletics check or a strength check.
Yes. So the point being is that the GM actually has to make that decision and tell the player what roll to initiate.
So I read these and then I didn't read them again. I think you have it backwards. I think Dungeon World is not the GM driven one, because the GM actually decides when the roll is triggered.
I don't think that's true.
If the fiction
I don't think it's the GM who decides it.
There's been
we're getting
plenty-
ahead of ourselves.
yeah.
We're getting ahead of ourselves. I'll make my case why I think Dungeon World is mechanical.
Sure, I think we will both make our cases and then we'll move on because I am actually in slight disagreement with you on this, and I should have said something earlier, so I apologize.
Yes, you should have, because you know how much I love when we disagree in the middle of a show.
I don't think that your points are wrong. I think I think what you said is legit. I just think that the way that Pathfinder functions,
yeah.
in the actual gameplay, which is like we are using miniatures on a mat.
Mm-hmm.
Like I move and I attack. Well, that's the mechanics determining the attack roll.
So once combat has been initiated,
Yes.
I agree with you. Once combat has been initiated, there is a very specific set of procedures
Yes.
for how one conducts combat.
Outside of combat, I agree with you.
Yes.
because that's how the game functions. Like it's then the game master making calls.
Right, because if the game master does not say roll for initiative, you can't get into the combat mechanic.
That is, and you can't as a player get into the combat mechanic.
Exactly. Now, I agree with you. Once you're in the combat mechanic, then yes, there is far more procedure that takes place, and you follow the procedure given.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think we've highlighted a little bit of both in those.
Yeah,
and
I
maybe
think-
we're about to in Dungeon World
Yeah,
as well.
I think Pathfinder does both of those depending on what mode of play you're playing in.
Yes, but I think ultimately the GM is controlling where you.
Oh, here
Get in.
I'll give you the really good example of this. So the idea of D&D is it's got three pillars, and they exist in Pathfinder in a lot of cases too. It is exploration, it is interaction, and it is combat. The combat is mechanically driven. The other two parts are GM driven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
I will definitely say that fits very well.
See, I mean, I figure we get there
There
eventually.
we go.
Swords Without Master.
So in the perilous phase in Swords Without Master, and I'm honing in specifically on the perilous phase.
Oh yeah, it's good.
In the perilous phase, the role is player driven.
It absolutely is.
So for people who haven't played before, what happens is the GM sets up the scene and hands the dice, because there's only one set of dice used in the game, hands the dice to the player, and then has to narrate their character struggling against whatever the opposing force is, and has to keep narrating the struggle until the player chooses to roll the dice and determine what the tone is of their action. So we've actually done this where you decided to kind of push this this idea a bit, and in a scene that we played out for like 4 minutes, you wouldn't roll the dice.
That's true.
Because I had to, for 4 minutes, kind of continuously narrate this lightning serpent smashing your character all over the deck of the ship.
It was awesome.
It was actually pretty awesome. And you just kind of kept going, and until I had to finally you rolled. I forget. I had to keep escalating. That's what it was. Because I think I got to a point where the next actions were going to like burst through the hull or something. And then you were like, yes, now I will roll.
Yeah, now I'll roll because I don't want the ship to get sunk. You
Right.
actually threatened the right thing.
Right. Because in Swords Without Master, I can't kill your character.
You can't kill a thing that's named, which is
Right.
including my character.
I can't kill your character without your consent. But everything else I narrate is absolutely true.
Except for, and you can't harm anything that is named.
Correct. But like, for instance, on that ship thing, if I had said I went through that ship because you didn't own it, I was going through that ship was going to sink.
That's why I rolled the dice.
Exactly. So anyway, it's an interesting case because it's not one we see very often where the player actually has the control of when to choose to make the roll.
It's accurate. It's very accurate.
Okay. Now, let's both take a deep breath.
Yeah, let's talk about Dungeon World.
And let's talk about Dungeon World.
So you think it's mechanically driven. I think it's partially mechanically driven, but I also think it's game master driven because sometimes it looks like a thing is triggered, but there's been enough times where I just gloss over that stuff.
So here's the thing. As I understand the game, and I could be wrong because I should have gone back and actually read the rule book carefully to see what the wording is on this. Moves are if-then statements. If you do this, then roll, and then there's a package underneath it for how to resolve the roll. So if I say in the game that I take my sword and swing it at the goblin, it's not really, if we're playing 100% pure, it's not really your choice as the GM whether or not it's a hack and slash roll. I have triggered the move.
I will make the counter argument. If you're in the bar and you decide to slap the guy at the bar,
It's technically a hack and slash
no,
move.
I can just say that you didn't because it's in a gray area. Sometimes they're obvious, sometimes they're not. The game master is allowed to then make the call whether or not that is actually triggering a hack and slash. Or the game master can then ask a question to clarify what the intent is.
I think that's fine, because if my intent is I'm gonna knock this punk to the ground and knock him out, I've entered hack and slash. If it's I'm gonna get this guy to back off,
And if it's just a peon, I can actually just say, well, you knock him out, because it's not really a hack and slash because it's not in a dangerous situation.
okay, so that's probably better. Is that again?
But that's not part of the move anywhere. That's why I can
No,
make
now
those
see, I want to
adjustments
go
to the Game
find.
Master.
Now I want to go find the move.
I mean, the move is just the move, right? It's when you intend to hurt somebody or something like that.
So here's what I'm going to say, that this is how I always remembered learning Dungeon World and most Apocalypse games, is that the way it's always taught is we're going to have a conversation until we trigger a move. Then we're going to trigger the move. It's not when the GM says a move's been triggered. It's always when a move has been triggered.
But when the move is triggered is an agreement between the player and the Game Master.
Interesting. It's not always the way I've interpreted it, but
It's the way that we played it for 2 years. 3 years.
I mean, yes. Also, I mean,
And I'm not arguing with you. I think you're right. Like when I learned the game, it worked really well for me to learn it because of that too.
Yeah,
and,
so-
I see your point, right? Like that is a great way. That is a great way to look at Powered by the Apocalypse games. I think though, when you get into that, there eventually becomes problems with the gameplay, because I don't think that was actually the intention of the game.
I can't speak to the intention of the game, and I can't say that you're not right, because you are right. There is a level of once you've played the game, there's a level of when to make a roll, when not to make a roll.
Also, I think triggering moves is an agreement between the player and the Game Master, not the precept of the game.
See, I think that triggering a move. All right, so this is one that I'm actually I mean, we don't have to. We can agree to disagree on it.
Yeah, sure.
But I would actually like to get I would actually like to get a couple of other experts to chime in on it. So I think I may ping Jason Cordova and ask
should.
him his feels on it.
I'd
Because
be interested to hear his feels.
yeah, because I'm just looking at like hack and slash. It says when you attack an enemy in melee. So if I say I pick up my sword and swing and at a goblin,
That is an enemy in melee.
that is an enemy in melee. Technically, we should do the move.
And if
Because
it's
because
it's
as a
one
GM,
singular goblin and you're all surrounding it, I can just say you kill the goblin.
you can say I just don't know if that's the proper thing. Like if we're playing orthodox Dungeon World, not how people really play games, because how people really play games is not always the same way. Like for instance, and we can have this as a future discussion. My use of the devil's bargain in Blades is not always the same way people use it. But I like it a certain way, and I've interpreted it to go a certain way. I'm curious to know. But anyway, I'm okay to split that decision. That
Sure.
There's some mechanical component, there's some GM component.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess the last thing I will say is that I do believe that the triggering of a move is an agreement between the player and the Game Master, because that's why you clarify for intent. But then that is the agreement whether the move is triggered or not.
See, and I've always used intent to hone in on which move it is. Because, for instance, the goblin is running up to stab the wizard, and Core jumps in front and cuts the goblin down. The question becomes, are you looking to kill the goblin, or are you looking to protect the wizard? Because that is the difference between
Defend
and hack and slash. Yeah.
And that is
And they're valid. Both are valid moves, but intent kind of says which move, because
It's true.
because the move is triggered by intent.
yes,
Yeah.
but also in certain situations, you don't actually trigger a move because it's not part of that. Because it says when you attack an enemy in melee, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, then we're talking about, well, is it really a melee? What is a melee? Like, how do
I
we
mean-
interpret that stuff? Like my thing where I punched the guy at the bar. I think you actually did that. Somebody did that once. Like, I'm gonna punch this guy at the bar. I'm like, you knock him out. But there you go.
I'm super interested now. Like now I want to crack that open and actually dig in deeper. Anyway,
Let's go to the Mountain Witch.
How do you want me to ping that? Or-
I don't think you have to pin it. I think
No, I was
Phil's just
saying-
going to go talk to Jason Cordova and see what's up.
no, that part I'm going to do. But no, I just no, there was a thing I actually asked.
Oh.
Oh, the difference between playing a game. I don't know if we'll get a whole topic out of it. The difference between playing a game as written and how we actually play games.
They're telling us to Rochambeau and thumb wrestle.
Nah, we're not actually in
We're
that
not
much
gonna do that.
disagreement. Nah.
Tell me about the Mountain Witch.
So the Mountain Witch says that a conflict is called when any participant, GM or player, wants there to be one. So typically that's going to be the GM's role in the game. But actually, the player can actually call one on themselves if they feel like it. So the GM could just be like, "No, it's fine. You cross the garden without incident." And the player can actually say like, "Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't." Because there are some things that come out of that fall out of having moves. So you might want to trigger a move to create additional drama in the game.
Oh, okay.
So you can, like the GM might be like, "No, it's fine. You cross the garden without incident." You might be like, "No, I don't think so. I think I want to make a roll for it."
Okay.
So that's actually like an option. You can do that.
That's interesting.
But the default of the game is that the GM will call for conflicts. How about Blades? Blades is kind of a weird one, right?
So, it's GM driven.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting case because the GM calls for the role based on the situation, but does not specify what ability will be used for the role. So they're like, "You're doing a thing," and hopefully the fiction up to that point will have sort of pushed towards what ability is actually going to be used, or at least a couple of abilities that could be selected.
I think
from.
I think it at least eliminates a bunch.
Yeah, and then the player is the one that makes the determination for what ability they're using. They spin their narrative where they've ever been to get whatever skill or ability that they want, which then lets the game master then set all the other stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird one in that. And I mean, I'll tell you, when I first started GMing Blades, like this thing killed me. Because my reflex is the traditional GM style of calling for rolls where I'm like, "Oh, that's a sway."
Yeah,
And it's got to be like,
and you can't
"Nope."
do that.
It's got to be like, "I want to roll."
Yep.
That's all I can say is, "I want to roll."
What are you using?
What do you think it is?
Uh-huh.
And the counter to that is, because this is the negotiation part, is that position and effect are the GM's tools.
Correct.
So if I don't think that your choice of action lines up well with the narrative, I can choose one or both of those things to adjust. Like I might tell you like, "Well, it's still risky because nothing about the situation is supercharged, but I think it's limited."
Yeah, like rolling up on someone and being like, "Give me what I want now," all aggressively, and being like, "I'm using sway."
Right. Yeah.
Well, that seems risky.
Yeah. Well, it may not be risky. It may just be limited.
Oh,
Like,
it
you
might be limited, yeah.
Right. Because, well, and I'll tell you this. So this is my interpretation of the rules is that I use controlled, risky, and desperate based on the situation where the action's occurring. And then I use the effect for how well do I think the action you're taking is aligned with the goal that you want to achieve. So, for instance, if you were being chased by the blue coats and you grab a guy to hijack his cart, and you're like, "I'm going to use command and tell this guy, give me your cart so I can get away." I'm going to tell you that that's desperate because the blue coats are right behind you yelling at you. But I'm going to tell you that it's either standard or great because command is exactly what you would do to take this guy's cart from him. But if you walk up to a guy on the street, no one's chasing you, and you are like, "I'm going to tell this guy to give me my
Well, the
cart."
situation's controlled at that point.
Exactly. But I use sway. I might be like, "Well, it's limited. Like he's going to listen, but he probably doesn't want to give you the cart."
Unless you're offering him coin with it.
Yeah, unless you've done something to actually improve
Then
the
we're talking
effect.
about leverage, right? Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so that's the interesting thing with Blades. And like I said, it trips up a lot of GMs when you first get into it because it's not your job to pick the thing. It's just your job to say, "We have reached a point where something interesting could happen." Like, I think something interesting can happen here. Now, do something about it.
And you can just let that go too if you want to. You don't have
I can.
to,
I don't have to do anything. I just right. And that, again, because it's GM controlled, I could just be like, "Yeah, you just take the cart."
And before we continue on, we're going to go to this ad from the Old School DM. Hey Phil, did you know the Old School DM got some ad space with us this month?
I didn't until I looked at the show notes tonight. So how about you do a better job of preparing me for these ads?
Oh, I'm sorry, man. I know how much you hate having these things pop up on you the last minute, but wouldn't you like to have some terrain that could just pop up?
So you're saying Randy's giving away some fold flat stuff?
He sure is. In fact, it's a complete fold flat coach house model.
Haha, joke's on you, Sneezak. I saw the email and I know all about it.
Damn it.
He's looking to get at least 50 Instagram followers. And you're going to put the link to his Instagram page into the show notes, as well as the unboxing video up in the show notes for people to check out.
Damn you and your show notes and links, Vecchio, and damn you. But everyone else, go follow the Old School DM on Instagram and get a chance to win some free fold flat terrain and to show the world the power of MMP advertising.
In fact, we're encouraging you, aka bribe, we're encouraging you so much to go and click on the Instagram page and tell your friends about it that we'll give whoever wins the Coach House free PDF copy, whoever wins the free Coach House, we will give them a free PDF copy.
By the way, misdirected Mark.
Not a word scramble. I stumbled. It's not a scramble. Scramble messes up the words. I just tripped over it.
Misdirected Mark word trip.
Thank you. I'm going to coin that thing myself tonight. Now, let me go back to what I was saying. We're bribing you people. This is the important part. We're bribing you. Go to the Instagram page. Tell your friends about the Instagram page. Rack up those likes, because if the Old School DM gets over 100 followers, we are giving away a copy of Dangerous Space Jail or the Legacy
How
Weapon.
about we just give them both?
We'll give them both.
Right?
Both of them.
Both of them to the person who wins the Coach House.
There you go.
That's what I'm saying.
Instagram it up and we'll see who gets some free stuff. Links in the show notes.
It's a trip, not a scramble. What's the chat room doing?
Hey, Bob. What's going on in the chat room for life?
Chat room's having a good time.
That was the best ad copy we've ever.
Yes.
Bespoke, man.
The beautiful thing
man.
about bespoke ad copies.
I didn't even write it wrong. I looked to see if I wrote it wrong before I made fun of you.
Yeah, it's good. This is legit. I just tripped up, man. That shit happened.
That's third time tonight, man.
You gotta love it.
I'm having some things,
No,
man.
it's cool.
Yeah.
I get it. I have those nights.
Yeah. Jared Rasher looked up 2 Apocalypse World inspired games that he had on hand just to look up moves. And Legend of the Elements is much more specific, and it says you must do the thing that triggers the move to trigger it. And if you trigger a move, you must resolve it. But the Veil is more when everyone agrees that a move triggers, then you go to the move to resolve it.
So it's a little.
So there's some
wiggle.
play.
There's some wiggle room,
Yep.
which now tells me that in Hydro Hackers, I probably want to put some wordage around that.
You do,
If
because
you want it to play a specific way, yeah.
my feel of Dungeon Roll, which is a very, very early generation Apocalypse World game, is very much that. Like, we should all agree on kind of what's going on.
And I'm actually fine with that. Like I'm not of the thing where, like, you said it, you have to do it kind of mentality.
I don't think your way's wrong either. Like, I just think it's
No,
in some ways I think it's a preference and a play style. I just don't think the rules are always very clear about it.
No, and so the thing is, when the rules, bless you, when the rules aren't very clear about it, the default almost always winds up being GM driven, because that's how we all learned.
Strange enough, for me, I guess because it's me, my default ends up being player GM agreement.
Yeah. Well, you're very collaborative that way.
These days, at least when it comes to a Apocalypse World game, and even when I'm running D&D, when I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we are good. We can move along to the next segment.
So Phil, pick us back
Yep.
up.
All right, so now let's just like have a general conversation about this. Like, we just had kind of a structured talk about what it is, and talked about a couple of different cases and things like that. But now I just wanted to kind of like throw this out and just ask a bunch of questions for you and I to
Sure, let's hit it.
to get into it. All right, so let's talk about play experience. So, what kind of play experience do we have when the GM calls for a roll? When the GM's in charge of calling for rolls, how about that?
So that's when the GM is much more in control of what is going on, or at least when the interesting moments are happening. Because what happens with a roll, and a lot of times, in my opinion, is that that's when the GM is like, oh, I have an idea for something interesting to happen, positive or negative. Or like the player is like, I want to do X, and the GM's like, well, I could just let you do X. Or, oh, this thing could happen if you don't do X. I think that's the better way to do it. Because
And that's how we kind of got into stakes.
Yes.
When this topic branched apart, that's where we got into stakes. And,
Yes.
and stakes is really good. It was so good that I was like, we need to do a separate topic on stakes.
But do you have anything to add to that, or should we move on to player for you?
No, I think the interesting part with GM is that and we'll talk about this a little more a little later in the segment, but because the GM controls it, sometimes roles aren't meaningful. So rookie GMs are notorious for calling for roles where roles aren't needed, right? It's like one of the first skills you learn as a GM is when to ask for a role versus just making everything a role. And I will cite that one game of Pathfinder,
the door.
the door that led to nowhere. Like that was clearly a case where we did not need to have a role.
Now, I think that is a part of, like, well, we'll talk about the rules instructed. Like, that's a rules instructing problem where the player, the game master didn't realize that, like, they should just override the rules for opening doors.
Well, and I'm sure that the adventure said, this door is locked.
DC whatever.
DC whatever to break it down. So therefore, it implies
Because it's a Pathfinder game, and,
Right.
and the Pathfinder system is a fiction engine. It's not a fiction engine. I mean, it's a simulation engine, right? Like, here is my fantasy world I am simulating with these rules, right? Like
Yep.
a video game press the button type of stuff. I mean, you don't have to play it that way, but those rules are in there that you could play it that way.
oh, you totally can. It's just how much fun is that?
I mean, to each their own. I'm not going to judge the fun factor.
That's fair,
Right.
My own preference for fun is make rolls count.
Yeah.
Like if nothing interesting is going to happen, just say yes.
I mean, I will blame the designer for that in some cases. Like, why would you put a DC 25 locked door in front of a room that has nothing in it?
correct.
If you're going to be writing for a game that's like that.
Well, and here's the thing, right? Because the reason why opening a locked door is fun in Dungeon World.
I'll also blame the game master for that too. Sorry. Go ahead.
The reason why opening a locked door, any locked door, is fun in Dungeon World is because on a 6-, the GM gets to make a move.
Assuming that the game master calls for a move there, because it's probably some sort of defy
true,
danger. Yeah.
absolutely. But if you let's say, but let's just take that same situation and just assume that we're going to make the roll.
Sure.
So in Dungeon World, there's a consequence.
Uh-huh.
Right? On that 6-, some cool shit's going to happen.
The game master's making a move.
Right. But in Pathfinder, nothing actually happens. Like, if you don't break down the door, the mechanics don't further instruct you for anything. You don't take damage.
You just don't break down the
You
door.
don't get exhausted. You don't take subdual damage on your shoulder for bashing in the door. Like,
Technically, the only thing that happens is time passes.
technically, a turn passes.
Yeah.
And that's it. And
Time.
now, if other shit is timed, because that was the question you asked me a long time ago, and every time I bring this up, this was not timed.
So it's pointless.
It's pointless.
I mean,
Anyway,
'cause nothing happens.
So, in the case of GM calling for a role, I think what I'm trying to say is that, and you said this as well, the GM has a lot of influence on the style of the game.
Uh-huh.
Because what is this game going to be role heavy? Is this game going to be more dramatic? We're only going to make rolls when it really counts. Are we going to make rolls for every little thing? Are we going to make no rolls or very few rolls? Mm-hmm. That becomes a function of the GM, and that's going to flavor your game because Pathfinder will feel very different if a GM calls for every roll imaginable versus somebody who is saving the rolls for when it's interesting.
It's true. There's also that thing too where if you're playing a pre-written adventure, does the GM has to call for less rules because the mechanics will take care of some of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, let's talk about player stuff. Hit me.
Yeah. So what? I mean, I don't know too many games, right, where players control when the dice get rolled.
You mentioned the two that I could think of, right? Like,
right. But what is that? What is that like?
I
'Cause
mean-
that's a little different.
and we're talking about dice rolls, the randomizer.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of not even a lot of co-op role playing games because there are some like GMless ones.
Mm-hmm.
Because the mechanics usually control that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of.
Although that's not. I mean, the players. I mean, okay, that's a weird thing. I was thinking Fiasco, right? But Fiasco, the players who are handing the dice are actually essentially taking over the GM role at that point.
yeah, it's like a distributed GM role.
Like Swords is one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Mountain Witch as being another one. Like,
Yeah.
no, I choose to roll. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, any game that does that, like, I choose to roll the dice at this point for reasons,
Right.
whatever those reasons
Well,
are.
and I think then you have to, as a player, you have to be willing to stick your character out there a little.
Well, that's. I mean, usually in those games, you're very unlikely to like lose
Die.
a character or anything like that.
I mean, I think the cool reason. I mean, you're right. The cool reason in Swords that you can hold on to those dice is you're not going to die.
Because I'm more interested to seeing what happens when you put me in a terrible spot.
Yeah, and how terrible can I make the spot before
Uh-huh.
you decide to draw a line in the sand
It's
and make
funny
make
how
your
you
stand.
learned that lesson that day. That threatening me doesn't do anything, but threatening the things around me does.
Well, yeah, because it's you're a named thing. Mm-hmm. But it was fun. Like
It was.
it was totally fun to do
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
That's really it for the player thing. I mean, that's what,
I really don't have a lot for the player
well,
one.
it creates that space of play, right? Like, it can create that thing like, well, I'm not rolling these dice because I'm going to wait for you to tell me more terrible stuff that's going on because I want to see what the story is.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, then it becomes kind of a back and forth with the GM. Like, I'm not liking what you've put out so far.
Yeah, so keep
I'm
putting it out.
So put something else out until I like it. And I'll roll these dice.
A lot of times when players can roll dice or can interact with the mechanics like that, even if they're playing with other players, like that's about saying, well, I'm picking my time to do the thing. Like you're waiting for the moment.
So maybe what we're saying is that in player driven, it leans towards a dramatic.
That is a perfectly valid.
If the player has a good sense of drama and dramatics.
No, I mean, regardless of good or bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if they have a good or bad sense of drama. Like, yes, that is. I just think there's probably another couple of things to it. I just can't think of any other things to it.
Right.
Like, there's probably some that is absolutely true. I'm just thinking there's probably more to it.
Right. Like I've seen people who've played Swords Without Master for the first time will drop those dice the second the GM says something.
Well, that's okay too, though.
Which is fine. It just, immediately the game shifts to the next step of the procedure.
Yeah, but then they figure it out.
Right. But then like you watch somebody who holds on to him for a little bit
Uh-huh.
and tells this like really cool like tale of what's happening
Mm-hmm.
and then rolls, like that's, then you're like, oh, that's why you hold the dice.
That's why that game does that, right? I just can't think of another game that does it, so it's hard to compare other things.
I know. When I sat and did this, I like racked my brain. I was like, I got one, and I mean, I got a lot of games laying around.
Yeah,
and I
that's
came up
the only
with
time
one.
I've ever heard of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then we already kind of talked about how when the rules instruct it.
yeah. I mean, the
Like-
rules instructed it's a little more hands off.
Yeah, that means it's a little more procedural.
Yeah,
That means your play experience is more guided.
yes. Which could be okay. So if you're looking to if the designer is looking for you to have a particular play experience, hard coding how the roles get made into the system.
Fall of Magic does this exceptionally well.
Yeah.
Like the Fall of Magic is based on this idea.
Yeah, there aren't too many roles in Fall of Magic, but there are a couple.
I mean, we were using roll as a
randomizer.
as a randomizer or a deterministic choice, right?
Yep.
So your deterministic choice in Fall of Magic is where you put your token.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
in the available spaces you can put your token.
correct.
Yeah.
So I mean that is procedurally driven, rules driven.
Oh, that's player driven.
It is player driven, but it's not necessarily like the player puts it down, but the rules have instructed you how to do it, right? Like
And when to do it. Because
Yeah.
when you move into a new town, you go
Uh-huh.
around the table, everyone has. But yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. That's a little
I
more.
mean, it's kind of a mix of both of them.
yeah. I mean, the player gets the choice where, but they don't have a choice of when.
I don't think any of these are just on their own.
There aren't too many
things.
pure ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right.
So I
think
mean,
there are a
they'll
lot of-
have mixes, like we talked about the D&D thing. Like the different pillars do it different ways,
Yes. Absolutely.
And
They are a
even-
little different.
and even the stuff within that stuff, like the combat sequence, it's still player driven in some way because the player can choose not to engage.
Yes.
They can do a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And then we get back into the GM calling for rolls, right? Like we were playing D&D on Monday night, and we were in the last room of the Doom Vault.
Can I
and-
ask you real quick?
Sure.
What version?
5th.
Okay, just checking.
So we're in a room that's like it's the inside of a D4, basically inside of a pyramid, and the gravity's messed up. So like you can walk to one other side of the pyramid and whatnot.
Did you make this room up?
No,
Okay.
I didn't.
Part
This
of
is-
the adventure.
Part of the adventure.
I'm sorry, it sounds like the shit you would do. Okay, keep going.
Sorry. Well, thank you, because I actually really like this adventure. I'm glad that you think that I'm that good.
Oh,
Anyways,
Sorry, I've many eyes.
I know. Anyways, Drew is like, they're the sepulchers, and he's like, does the gravity work weirdly on the sepulchers? Like, can I walk up on a sepulcher like it's like gravity messed up? And I'm like, actually, it's not in the adventure that it can do that. But I'm like, yes,
Yes, you
yes,
can.
you can. So then he walks up in the sepulcher and leaps off of it into the middle of the gravity space to try to attack the demi-lich that's floating around.
Yeah, there we go.
So I had to make a call though, right? Like, but when he did that, he still has to obey the attack rules, right?
Yes.
So now we were talking like, I make the call for the skill check, but then he has to obey the attack rules for attacking.
So that's a really good point. Okay, so that's a thing that we actually didn't talk about earlier, because I have done this in other games as well, which is I will call for a roll for a roll.
Yeah.
Like I will say, like, yes, you need to make this skill check, and if you can make this skill check, then you can do X.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even not X for me. Like I was like, well, you can attack him 2 of your 3 attacks, or you can attack him 3 of your 3 attacks and fall in the goop or you can attack them all three of your attacks and not fall in the goop because there was goop.
And that's your stake setting.
I'm setting stakes, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was making the GM call, right?
Right.
To then go with the rules instructing play.
Right. And you so here's the thing I like that you did, which is a little tangenty from what we were talking about, but and will be a nice lead into when we talk about stakes. But here's the thing where you offered more attacks at a price.
Sort of. I offered the better the roll, the better the situation was for you to get attacks. I dungeon rolled it.
Yeah.
I gave a 10, 15, 20 situation.
Yeah. There you go.
So, I mean, that's actually what I did, which is perfectly fine. I thought it was perfectly valid.
Well, I thought you said something like you get 2 attacks.
So,
There's 3 attacks you can.
If you rolled a 10, you only got 2 attacks and fall
you
in
did
the
it
goop.
off the skill check.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's really good then. Okay,
Yeah.
so you called for a skill roll.
Yes.
And then the skill roll basically rolled right into
The procedural play.
Yeah. Got it. Neat.
So that's what I did. What are we talking about now? Are we talking about play experience? Oh, we just talked about play experience.
We did. We talked about play experience. Here's the topic I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
We have talked about this in the past where we talk about switching from narrative to mechanistic back to narrative.
Sure.
So let's just talk a little bit about when a roll is called and how that influences the narrative structure of the game.
Okay.
Because I think there were some things you and I have talked about offline about positioning and setting up for a role and things like that.
Uh-huh.
So let's just talk a little bit about that because how a role gets called for has a lot to do with the narrative flow of your game.
It really does. Yeah. I mean, if you're using initiative for when your people can act and make choices, like that's very different from when I can just point at somebody and say, "What do you do?" Mm-hmm. I mean, those are that is when you call for roles in a lot of cases, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly, but like turn order matters. Like we talked about initiative before,
Right. Turn order matters.
but that plays a lot into when a role gets called for.
Right. What you say matters.
What you say matters a ton because that gives you narrative positioning in a lot of cases.
Right. So I think
Also, there's another thing. Your action economy has a lot to do with the role that you can make, like, and when you can roll it.
and what you can say you can do.
Depending on if your game has action economy or not.
Yes.
There's a lot of so that's an interesting thing because the role is surrounded by a bunch of other mechanisms, and without understanding all those mechanisms and how they interact, it's hard to have that conversation.
So in combat, I will say yes, you're surrounded by a lot of other mechanisms because action economy tends to not show up until you get into combat.
It's true.
Because you can just narrate and you're allowed to do stuff. Just
I don't know if that counts as hitting the microphone. If the microphone hits me, what happens if the microphone hits me? Do I can't put my hands on my does my head go on my hands?
I
then?
think you have to scold the microphone. I think is
I just
so. Chris
scolded the
is
microphone.
resting his arm on the microphone, and a little physics just occurred where
Yeah.
the microphone lurched at him.
Yeah, I got punched in the face by a mic. It's pretty good.
Okay, sorry. So the thing I wanted to bring up was, and maybe we're going to talk about this in a little bit. We are going to talk about this in a second. So let me just go back to the form of narrative control. If a GM wants a narrative heavy game, they can lay off of calling for a lot of roles.
They can.
They can just let a story.
In fact, that's when you get those nights when like we didn't have a single roll all night games,
Right.
Like we just kept playing the game and talking to each other. We just kept having the conversation.
Which leads to one of our other classic.
Yeah,
classic
we're
we're not having that argument. It's
no,
okay.
I'm actually less onto that thing at this point because I mean, they're still playing a game,
No, I mean that is absolutely
and they're still
true.
playing the game that they were playing. They're just not engaging with a lot of the mechanics. They're just engaging with a lot of the narrative based mechanics.
Did Angela get to you?
No, I mean,
I feel like Angela got to you.
I still understand like.
No, I'm just teasing. Please don't tangent off this.
No, here, let me.
Okay, here we
can
go.
I do
Do
this?
it.
Can I tangent it now?
Tangent away.
All right. If you have a character sheet and it's got a bunch of shit on it, and you're playing off the character sheet,
Yes.
based on how you're acting and playing out,
Yes.
or you're playing it off based off the shared history of the characters as you're moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're still playing the game, the game that you were playing together with those people. I don't know if you're necessarily playing the mechanical game that's written in the book.
Well, you're certainly not engaging the mechanics.
You're certainly not engaging the mechanics. I just get really annoyed when people are like, "We had the best session of whatever that one night, and this game is amazing." I'm like, "You actually didn't get a good feel for the game. You get a good
also
feel for
fair. You had a great session.
you had a good feel for your game.
Yeah, you might
right?
have had great feels about that game, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and I won't even say like the session thing. Like, you're still playing that game because those characters have shared history at that point. It's a campaign, right? Like that's a good session of your game then, and not just a session of your game, but game at that point for those players.
Yeah. So you absolutely, when in a GM controlled, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say it's just a terrible example of the game itself.
Yes. I mean, if I was going to hand you an AP and say this is D&D,
And there was never a role made all night.
it's not really.
I'm not really like, it's
Yeah.
cool for the group, but it's not good for everybody else. Like, it just depends on what lens you're looking at it through.
Yes.
So there you go. That's my.
It's a very nice, concise version of of that older argument.
Yeah, I mean, that's the real version of it. Like that's what's actually going on there.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to that, when you have GM controlled roles, the GM can really set the flavor for a session, a campaign, or whatever based on calling the roles.
It's true. I
Like-
know, because Blades is brutal sometimes.
So Blades, the GM doesn't get it. The GM gets it in two places. The GM can be lenient on calling for roles, but the GM also gets it where they position roles. So what the effort is. So whether it's controlled, risky, or desperate. Because if you're playing that game on hard mode, the GM's having you make desperate rolls constantly.
That's true. Yeah,
And it's harsh.
Then they beats you down.
It does beat you down because the mixed result, the 4-5, which is the 7 to 9.
Yeah.
The 4-5 is not good.
No,
Yeah.
heck, the 4-5 for desperate isn't great either.
Desperate's the worst one.
Oh, no,
risky.
Risky. The
Yeah, it's
4-5
not, the
for
4-5
risky
isn't great either.
Isn't great either.
No, the 4-5 almost always in those two levels makes you want to spend stress.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway.
You want to talk about how we leverage this stuff in play, this procedure in play?
Yeah, this is, I think this is actually how the topic got started. You and I were talking about narrative positioning a couple episodes ago, and what we were talking about was since you know how the role gets triggered in your game as a player, knowing what to say to either get the role triggered or to have said enough stuff before it triggers has an influence on the role.
Yeah, there are two kinds of games that I've been able to discern. There might be more, but there's one where you've narratively positioned yourself to get the kind of triggering role that you want.
Yes.
And then there's the one where you're like, well, I need to survive this thing that's coming up, so I need to give myself as much advantage as possible before the roll because the game master doesn't have any, because it's a mechanical based thing and not a game master based thing post roll.
Yes.
So I need to give myself as much advantage because the game master can give me advantage before I make the roll, so that I have the best opportunity to survive the roll.
Yes. And so I actually found some really good terms because I was reading The Mountain Witch, which is a kind of older, it's 2005 and it's like post Forge.
Yeah.
So there's a few mechanical terms I hadn't seen in a while, which is fortune in the middle versus fortune at the end.
Oh, interesting.
So fortune at the end is like an attack roll where there's nothing you can do after the roll's made. You either hit or miss.
Yep.
Fortune in the middle is something more like a roll in fate where I make the roll and then there's some things I can do after the roll before the roll's final. So like I can spend a fate point. I can invoke a few aspects so that
That's totally the other side of it that I didn't think about too.
right.
Because
So
the messing with it post roll.
yeah. So and I've
Which I
purposely
should've.
avoided it in this because that is a topic which we could certainly do, which is fortune at the end, fortune in the middle.
We should at some point. Hey, would you pin that, please?
Yeah.
Ding.
That's a fascinating
Yeah.
design space. I don't know why it didn't occur to me when we were
Yeah.
talking about this.
We'll talk about we'll talk about that one because that one's
Because we're talking about the roll and not how to mess with the roll post thing.
right. But here's the thing. So leading up to the roll, for instance, if I know that we're playing a game like, let's say we're playing 3-5 where the GM can give situational bonuses, +2, -2 kind of thing.
Sure.
So if I know that I'm heading into a particular role, like let's say search, if I start super describing how I'm searching, like I start saying things like I throw sand all over the floor to look for, or I'm looking for, I don't know, I'm looking for something. I put marbles on the floor and see where they roll or whatever. If the GM calls for the roll, they also have the opportunity often to adjust either the difficulty or assign bonuses. So they could say like, oh, that's really good. Because you're using marbles to look for the slope in the floor, I'm going to give you a +2.
Or advantage.
Or by 5e, it's advantage. Right. So that's another thing, right?
Or
Like that's
+5.
using the narrative to, when the roll strikes, to get in there with the best possible modifiers.
Here, can I make some more examples?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, or a +5, or I'm going to make the dice go up higher because of DCC.
Yeah, in
Or-
DCC, this goes up. You're going to go up one in the die chain.
Okay,
Yeah.
continue. Sorry.
I think that's super fascinating because that's how you leverage it, right? Like if you know that the GM controls the role, and if you know the game supports situational modifiers, it's your job to narrate in whatever modifiers you can get.
Yeah.
Whereas something with Dungeon World, the GM can't modify the role.
Well, they can with +1 forward. They can offer +1 forwards.
Is that a GM move?
I mean, that's just a thing in the game. Like, you can sometimes say you get a +1 forward for a situational thing that's advantageous to you.
Moves often grant +1 forwards.
They do, but you can also just offer it.
Okay.
It's a thing.
Okay.
It's pretty much a thing in pretty much every Powered by the Apocalypse
I
game.
didn't know there was a thing GM could grant. GMs are fairly locked down in Powered by the Apocalypse.
You'd be surprised.
I am surprised. I didn't think GMs could hand out +1 forwards. It's fine.
I mean, if the narrative dictates that it's so advantageous that they should get a +1 forward, then you can just give it.
Okay.
You should really think about these things. Like, there's that whole guide to Dungeon World that other guy wrote. A lot of that stuff's in there.
Yeah, that's what the other guy wrote.
Yeah, but it's also the thing that everybody looks at is like, here's how you actually learn how to play Dungeon World.
Yes. This goes to my
And even Sage and Adam said it.
But it's
So-
not actually a move that the GM gets. It's just
it's
I
just
don't know.
philosophy.
It's narrative positioning. I mean, and it's a mechanical impetus from narrative positioning.
okay, but in the absence of all other media, if the only book you ever read was Dungeon World, does it say in Dungeon World you can give a +1 forward?
I don't think it doesn't.
But you also don't think it does.
I can't remember. It's been a long time since I read
It's
that
fair
book.
enough. It's fair enough. It's been a while since I've read the book too. And again, this goes to how you play a game versus how the game is written, because those don't necessarily have to be the same thing. And I don't necessarily disagree that.
Pretty sure I've heard Jason Cordova just give +1 forwards on Discern Realities.
Also, not 100% certain that that's just the way you play. That's the way they play the game, as opposed to how the game is meant to be played. There is a difference between those two things.
I would have to go and listen to Adam Kobil run Black Swan, and then I could be like, there. Authority. Writer
Yeah,
did it.
I'm fine. Then go publish a second edition.
I mean,
Like, go
probably
put it
not.
in the second edition. I'm okay with it. I mean, trust me, it's a thing that's actually hung me up in my design for Hydro Hackers is it okay for me to give a bonus if I like where the narrative positioning went? And I never actually settled in Hydro Hackers whether I allowed that or not. So when I run it, I don't.
What do you give when do you give advantage then? 'Cause you have
Advantage is
in your
actually
game.
pretty specific. Advantage only comes up in help, and maybe one other place, but it's mechanic. It's move driven. It's
Yeah,
not.
if
It's not for me. It's never for me to grant, and neither is disadvantage. Disadvantage is wounds, failed help attempts, and that might be it.
Yeah. If I was running a game, I would totally give people +1 forward if the narrative that they spun was like
No.
super awesome.
No, real quick, it's actually unfair to say, does the GM have a move that can grant a +1 forward? Because none of the GM moves are things that do stuff like that.
They
All the
don't.
GM moves are things that provide that make things happen when play either slows or when things go.
Right, but here's the thing that trips me up. I mean, I get what you're saying, and again, like I said, from a design point of view, I totally get why it should be in there. The thing that's always tripped me up is that a GM doesn't do anything in Dungeon World until a 6- is rolled.
Huh, that's actually not true at all. Because the GM can actually do whatever they want. They can make things happen constantly.
I'm sorry, not 6-. There's 3 conditions. When the players ask what happens, when the players turn to you to figure out what happens on a 6-, and
when they're not doing anything.
and when they've stopped doing anything. But
That's when I can make a move. Granting a +1 forward isn't giving a move. Isn't making a move.
yeah,
It's just-
I'm with
it's-
you. I'm with you. I just have never done it before.
Yeah, sure. I get it.
I've never done it. I totally see why to do it, and I'm considering that it's a rule that I may want to actually code into Hydro Hacker so that it's
I thought you
clear.
were leaving those out because I thought you were just going to go with the advantage thing.
Advantage is pretty powerful. Like I give advantage for big stuff. Like
Oh, okay.
I don't like. I give a +1 forward for I like the way you're spinning this narrative. I give advantage for like. Advantage should be much bigger.
You should think about that because when you give a +1 forward to somebody who's got a +2 in a thing, it pretty much almost automatically means that they get a 7 or higher.
Yeah. Whereas advantage doesn't guarantee.
And if they have a 3, in a thing, then it gives them a 4, which almost completely dictates that they're going to succeed. Or at least get a hit, I should say.
Yeah, but again, up to this point in Hydra Hackers, I've never actually done that, right? Like I just like what I will do is if you have done really good narrative positioning, I take that into account on a 6- when I have to make my move. I will make my move based off of the awesome narrative you have set up.
Yeah.
Like I will eliminate myself from making certain moves.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, you did such a good job walking your way into this.
Here's the best example I can give for Dungeon World and how it makes sense. When you have a bag of books, you can pull out a book that is about a thing and get a +1 forward on that to know stuff. But really all that mechanical thing right there is saying is that you have narrative positioning to do a thing, to get a +1 forward on a thing.
Yeah, and usually that's expendable kind of thing.
Sure.
Most of those are like marka.
And most narrative positioning things are often just momentary +1 forwards.
Yeah, I mean, again, items are player driven. Moves are player driven.
Items are player driven, except for the items that the game master gives to players, and also the spaces that.
Yeah, but I don't have a problem with that. If you're like, if we're running a game and you're like, I grab these books out of the library and take them with me, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? When you make next time you make a discern reality check or whatever, a spout lore. You can use one of these books to get a +1, mark it, and you get 5 uses.
Yeah,
like I'm totally cool with that.
So you expand that idea right there, because that's how I expand the adventuring kit thing to like other things for like, well, you have a bunch of alchemical components. You have 3 uses of alchemical components, but it also works if you expand the idea from the bag of books thing to other things like, oh look, there's a trampoline here. If I use the trampoline, it's a +1 forward to get up on top of the ledge.
I mean, okay.
That's narrative positioning.
I'm with you. And I will say this, and again, from a design point of view, like when I looked at a whole bunch of items from a whole bunch of different Powered by the Apocalypse games, and I grouped them into 3 things. There are items that are moves.
Sure.
Like, use this item, roll this move. There are items that grant bonuses. Use these books, get a +1 to whatever. And then there are just items that simply give you narrative positioning. So possession of this item doesn't give you a bonus. It simply lets you do a particular type of move. So like I may not grant, I think this is a GM decision. A trampoline, I may say, you don't get a +1 for Defy Danger decks. You just can reach the second story of that building.
That is a completely valid way to do it.
Yeah.
It's just about how you want to rule it, but both ways are valid. That's what I'm saying.
I don't disagree.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you. I seriously have never done.
Because we weren't at that point before where you agreed with me. We were at the point before where we were like, the rules don't say that, so you can't actually do that.
So here's the thing. If the rules don't say it, that's one thing. Do I agree that it's a decent GMing practice? Actually, I agree it's a decent GMing practice.
Well, I was just explaining in the rules where it actually does say that. You just have to think a little bit more about it. Because the bag of books is a +1 forward, so therefore other item could be a +1 forward.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with that as an item.
No. And so that means some situation can provide a +1 forward.
That's the part that's the part I haven't made the logical leap to.
Yeah.
I totally see why. I totally see how. I just never got that.
Because dragging the trampoline from across the room to put it there is giving you fictional positioning. That's my point. Like, you're taking action to do a thing. Like, that's the thing about fictional positioning. It's about having the thing. Like, pulling the book out is meaningless until you describe what the book is. That gives you the fictional positioning to do it. That is where I'm going with this.
I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm with you. I just, again, it's if I'm playing Orthodox versus just playing the game.
I was giving you the Orthodox version of it, right? Like, that's how those mechanics work. That's what they imply.
Yeah, so if the trampoline's marked as when you use this trampoline, take a +1 on, Defy Danger.
Yeah, but I'm allowed to make up moves and items whenever I feel like it. And that means I can just invent that stuff on the fly if I feel like it.
I'm okay with that. I think what I'm less okay with is just the I'm talking to so and so. Oh, I like what you're saying. Take a +1 forward.
Oh no, that would unless they've provided one leverage and then beyond leverage. Like, oh look, I have this note that implicates you in this blackmail scheme. Then I'm like, well.
Oh well, now.
But that's fictional positioning.
Yes, but Yes, but it involves an item or something.
Most fictional positioning involves an item, or involves you acting in a certain way, or having or doing a thing.
We may be closer to this than I initially thought.
I don't think we have the same definition of fictional positioning in our head. Because some fictional positioning is stronger than other fictional positioning.
I agree.
Yeah.
So yes, if you're saying I have a bag of gems and I am going to use this bag of gems to coerce this guard to let me in,
Bag of gems doesn't always just mean.
then I may
can
say
buy
yes,
stuff.
take a plus
Take
one
a plus one
forward,
forward.
and use up 3 gems. Okay.
And that's actually explicitly, quote unquote, in the book.
Yeah, that part
under
I'm
equipment tags.
I mean, some of them are.
Yeah, that part
Yeah.
that description I'm super comfortable with.
Also, like that's the thing about these Powered by the Apocalypse games. Like they, a lot of them give us the freedom to create things within them to make calls.
Yeah, I think the one that I wouldn't mess with is like I run real fast at the guy.
No, there's no fictional positioning there, really.
Oh, good, because Chris, I swear for a few minutes that's what I thought you were saying.
No.
Okay, way back machine. I actually agree with everything you said.
Okay. Like, I run real fast at the guy is not good enough fictional position to get there.
Thank you. Okay, but something like I jump in the cart and roll down the hill and smash into these guys.
And then I'm
instead
gonna say make a defy danger roll, and then if you succeed, I'm gonna give you +1 forward because you didn't fall off the cart.
yeah, or I might do something like the cart is a D8 for damage.
Sure, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Okay. We're in a lot better space. I'm with you.
We had a very different definition of fictional
We
positioning
were
in our head.
really kind of diverging on that. Okay, that's better. That's
All
better.
right.
Feel better.
Now that we figured that out.
I feel better. I feel better
you
about
gotta,
that.
You gotta work a little bit. You
That's
don't
all
get
right.
it for free.
All right. Sometimes we gotta take the journey.
Sure.
That's fine. I'm good. I'm good now.
This aside of fictional positioning brought to you by Mr. Mark
There
Productions.
might be whatchamacallit. There might be a moment we need to talk more about
Fictional positioning?
Yeah. We can never talk enough about fictional positioning.
It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Uh-huh.
It's like
in
me-
fact, I believe next week we're having a guest, and that is the topic.
Oh, is it? That's right. Hobbs is coming on to talk about that, right?
Right, because fictional positioning, again, quick aside before we close out this segment, fictional positioning is a fantastic OSR and indie game bridge.
Of course it is.
Because fictional positioning is big stuff in OSR games, and it's a big deal for us indie people. And the truth is, as we know, there isn't that much difference.
It's true.
There's like a little procedural difference.
There's procedural difference.
But there's not that much beyond that.
There's not much you can do for people
We are
after the roll.
far more brothers than we are enemies.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think it by looking at it, but
Well, I think that's a
we're
whole...
getting better.
Yes. Okay. Anyway.
Are we good? Do we want to move on?
Yeah, let's talk about any problems.
I mean, you can get way too much hand wavy if you want, and I don't even know if that's a problem. I actually don't. I don't know if that's a huge problem if you're hand waving for everything, because then you get those games that we talked about where it's just like, we're gonna play without rolling the dice or engaging our mechanics all night.
I think worse than hand wavy is lack of consistency.
Yeah, that's terrible.
So let's say that, for instance, in the middle of the game, we run away from an encounter, and I make you make a whole bunch of moves to get away from the encounter. 10:45 at night, 15 minutes before the game is supposed to end, you run away from an encounter. And it's late, and we should be wrapping up, and I'm just like, yeah, you run away from the encounter.
That's when I say we're gonna cliffhanger this until next time.
That's what you should do, but lots of GMs will just hand wave that, right? Like, that's that inconsistency.
Yeah.
Like, because we are the trigger in those games, we're the trigger for a move, we actually do need to have some sort of internal consistency. We don't need to be orthodox to the rules, but we need to have some sort of internal consistency, because consistency is important when we play games.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, talk about hacks and wish lists.
Sure. What are some of your hacks and wish lists?
Man, I tried, like, there's a lot of times when we get to these mechanisms, like, I don't know what the hell to think of. But here's the one I think I would like. I think I would like mechanism where you can just, as a player and as a GM, you can just agree to an outcome. Like, even in the middle of combat, you could just be like, I stabbed the orc. And as the GM, I could be like, okay. Like, you stab the orc, roll for damage.
Oh, you want that actually as a procedural rule written into the game?
Yeah. Or the player could be like, I fail. Like, you're going to search for traps, and the player goes, nope, I fail.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as long as there's something that goes along with that.
Well, I mean, if I'm hacking
What
this
is-
game, I got to put some stuff. I got to
Yeah,
put some
what is-
meat. I got to put some meat on that, right?
I mean, you're just talking about actual deterministic procedure. So deterministic procedure is like you actually just choose a thing, and then there's some sort of consequence or resource that is gained from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is the petitioner grantor mechanic from
Very
from
similar.
Hillfolk.
Yeah, very similar, except that sometimes I can roll, and sometimes I can just choose not to. And if I choose not to, if I choose to fail, I gain currency,
Uh-huh.
and if I choose to pass, I spend currency.
Yeah, that's very much Hillfolk.
That's very much Hillfolk, but like then strap on like a regular mechanic.
Oh,
in
you want the
middle.
other stuff to it too.
Yeah. So sometimes I might be like, no, let the dice decide. And sometimes I might be like, you know what? I don't want the dice to decide because I'm lining up for a crit and I am going to deliver the killing blow. And I've spent all night getting my ass kicked and I got this big old pile. And right now I'm cashing them in to stab this dragon right in the eye.
Sure, you're trying to take you're taking the yeah. I get you.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, but for that, to get
wanna-
that pile of points,
I want my randomized game, but then I want to have this other mechanism where I can make choices to get currency.
for dramatic sake, I'm going to get my ass
Well.
kicked. I guess what comes close to this is kind of like fate,
I mean, the compel is what that is.
a little bit, right?
and
I'm gonna
the,
I'm gonna let you compel the shit out of me so I can get a big old pile of.
Often creating an advantage works that way too because you're creating the advantage at that moment to use it later. Really,
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes it has fictional positioning also,
Yeah.
which creates a truth. But
but I think a lot of games don't have the. I'm willing to fail, like I'd like to fail this roll, please.
yeah, because there's a thing about that too. Like, are you going to fail the stupid rolls? Like,
Well, I think there has to be some rules, right?
The
Like,
protections inside of that, right?
yeah, you need some protections because there's definitely a spammy thing where you're
Yeah.
like, I fail to
But that's-
open doors, but I hit every monster.
That's a design thing, right? Like,
Yeah,
you can choose to fail attack rolls.
You can
or-
only fail where there's a real consequence.
Yeah.
You know, something has to go wrong.
That's when you let the game
definitely-
master determine that stuff.
Yeah, and it definitely gets close to
I mean, that comes to the bargaining thing, which is fine.
and stakes.
And stakes.
Yeah. I mean, it could be that we set stakes
It could be
and
like,
then
sure, you fail this roll and this bad thing happens to you.
Yeah.
And then you get your point.
right, like okay, I'll take it.
Yeah. Then we're bargaining.
Yeah.
which
And
is
then we're
fine.
all in agreement. Like we're okay. Like I say I don't want it. Like,
Sure.
you know, I don't want that success. I'll take I want my point more.
I don't really have a lot of hacks or wishes.
No,
I
I
think
know.
I think that one's super interesting.
Yeah. That's the best I could come up
I
with.
can't think of a game that has it. Like most of the die rolling hacks that exist in games already exist for me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm getting to the point now because I've read enough games and seen enough things. Like
There's-
I don't know what else is new yet.
Yeah.
Like I haven't
And
seen
somebody's
it.
gonna think of it.
Like I can't wait for Project Dark to come out because I like the mechanics in that game and how the cards work.
Yes.
And eventually, supposedly, Will Heimarch has it almost done. I can't wait. I've been waiting for it for like 5 years.
Has it really been 5 years?
It's been a long time.
I mean, it hasn't hit far west. Like
No.
No, and at least Will keeps talking about it.
Yeah.
No, I like Will, so it's cool. Like,
no,
he's-
Will's a totally cool guy.
yeah, I feel bad for him that he hasn't gotten it done yet, and some bad things happened to him, like that game was supposed to get published.
That's the stuff that constantly scares the shit out of me about.
Kickstarter.
Well, here's the thing. I'm less scared because
We have a good team.
we have a team.
Yeah. So, anyways, let's move on. So that's our coverage on the procedure for when rolls are made, and now let's go to the chat room and see what they have to say about everything that we've been saying, which is crazy. And
Yeah,
then-
we had a very good discussion. The chat peeps did a bunch of digging and went through a bunch of different Apocalypse World stuff and looked at how things were called out and stuff like that, and came up with you're like, oh yeah, you can get the +1 forward from equipment tags and stuff like that. So in the end, it's there, but it's not there.
What it tells
No.
me is
Yeah.
what it tells me is now I want to go be very explicit in Hydro Hackers.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, exactly.
I want to be very explicit about move triggers,
Sure.
right? Like move. Like I actually like what you said, which is move trigger should be the thing agreed upon at the table. Like
that's what it is for me.
Right. I like that very much, and I have the opportunity to make sure that is codified.
The move that I use the most at my dungeon roll tables is Defy Danger. And Defy Danger is always a modification for me in a lot of cases to some sort of slight variation on that, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, Defy Danger is the
I mean, I was playing World of Dungeons before World of Dungeons existed in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
Yes.
With some other moves strapped to the side of it.
I mean, I can tell you in Hydro Hackers what the most what the most used move is.
Yeah?
Which is come across, the move where you socially get somebody to do a thing.
Uh-huh. That makes sense.
Which is actually why I've redrafted that move, because I think it doesn't quite have enough oomph for how much it gets used in that game.
It's a series of very interesting debates we had tonight.
Yeah,
We
it was.
didn't even get mad at each other.
No. I don't want to actually get mad at you.
Well, me neither. I just want to talk about stuff. Like, I thought that was
I
fun.
find that stuff fascinating. Like,
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I have a very specific view of Dungeon World that I'm actually now willing to. I'm willing to.
I have a
skew to
very
the side.
I have a very evolved view of how Dungeon World and certain Powered by the Apocalypse games works. It's one of the reasons why I have such a hard time with masks, because it's not that.
Yeah.
It's very much more locked down, and I have very much less to do except for making moves.
Yeah.
It's not written the same way. I have to get out of the way a lot more. So
Yeah. I mean, I actually think that. I actually think at times we're having way more fun than you are, because
no, I'm not having a good. I'm having a good time now that I'm sort of into what's going
Yeah.
on. But I have I do have the game is more about the interactions between all of you.
yes, and
And-
that's what I mean. Like, a lot of times I can get my conditions removed.
Yeah.
Off of the other players.
Well, that's
like
you're supposed to.
right. Like, I don't need to go like beat up somebody else. I can go, yell at one of my teammates.
That's the intent. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. I'm about 100% sure that's the intent of that
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
So I think what I've learned from tonight, which would be my big takeaway for Hydra Hackers, is that I like a lot of I like very much almost everything you said about that kind of evolved style of PBTA, and then also realize that none of that is explicit in my rules. And I have the opportunity, because I'm writing the rules, I have every opportunity to say that explicitly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that it's not ambiguous, it's actually right in there.
Yeah.
So, and soon, since you will be developing it, you will also find other things like that and can help me actually make sure that those get codified.
I just thought of another game that does a lot of good stuff for kind of what I'm talking about. If you look at Knights Black Agents and you look at the three narrative mechanisms, the contacts, the preparedness and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are essentially you have X amount of whatever, but that is also like in my Knights Black Agent game that I ran. Like, there was a situational thing where I was like, well, you got like 2 extra points here to spend because the situation is good for you,
Interesting.
right? Like, that's almost like a +1 forward.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of wiggle room in certain kinds of games.
Yes. It's actually one of the things I like about Blades is that
A lot of wiggle room in that game.
I have wiggle room.
Lots of wiggle room.
Right. So I have wiggle room in my position and effect.
Uh-huh.
I have wiggle room in how many ticks I want to put on a clock.
Yep.
Because I can say, like, well, this thing is difficult. It's a 6-tick or 8-tick clock versus this thing's pretty straightforward. It's a 4-tick clock.
It's also fascinating because you have wiggle room for setting the clock up, but
Yeah.
you don't have wiggle room later because where you set it is how many ticks will come off of it
yeah.
if you choose to tick the clock.
Yeah. So it's actually a thing I have to take into account is like, well, a 4-tick clock goes pretty fast because I will get usually 1 to 2 ticks every time something goes wrong. And when something really goes wrong, I get 3 versus a 6 or an 8. Yeah.
I gotta stop yawning. Holy Lord. All right. With that,
Anyway,
with my yawns.
roll.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's the social media depository. We are here, finally. Community chatter, Rob Eberzato, his do-it-yourself 30. Question 29. Goblins are great. Why or why not? There's a very great discussion going on in the community about it, but I figure we give our opinions too. So are goblins great or not?
I love goblins.
Why do you love goblins?
So first of all, I think we need an entry level monster. I like goblins because I think that I like goblins because I think you can do a lot more with them.
Yeah?
Yeah, well, I think they can be like, I don't like them stupid. I don't like any monster really stupid. So I like cunning and like kind of wicked goblins.
I like Pathfinder goblins because they're morons.
Oh,
Also,
Pathfinder goblins are hilarious.
they're also viciously terrible.
Yes. As we once played Weeby Goblins together.
We did. I mean, we played it for the comedy side, but I've seen the Pathfinder goblins doing terrible, terrible things. Like this one goblin was eating like the face of a dog.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like they're morons and they die a lot, but they're also terribly vicious things.
I think that's one of the things about goblins, right? There's some range to them.
Yeah, you know what the goblins are in Pathfinder? Really, the gremlins from the Gremlin movies. That's what they are.
Yes.
That's exactly what they are.
Which is like in one vein, oh, they're adorable and funny, and the other one, it's like, wow, they're terrible monsters.
yeah, and they start eating babies.
Yeah, and
'Cause they-
then
they do that.
and then you just have to go on like a cleave spree,
Pretty much. Pretty much.
fireball them out.
I think they're great because of that thing. Like, because they're like gremlins, basically, to me.
Yeah, I think you have some definite range with them.
What about you, Bob?
I think anytime you can get something like that where you can throw hordes at players, and, and they're not like
Except
immediately in a panic.
that's funny because except in our in the first time we ever played 5th edition D&D with Phil and folks, everybody died to a bunch of goblins.
Oh man, it was first level characters, man. Goblins were tough.
Yeah, it was funny. And also like 3 rooms got triggered at the same time.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
Yeah, that was not good.
Cool. So that's goblins.
Goblins awesome.
Let's move on to the Indie Game Developer Network Spotlight.
It was a big day for like
There's a lot of stuff going on.
This week, this day, like IGDN's been busy.
Yeah, so Amp Year 4, the year of the invasion. So that's what's going on right now. So Amp Year 4 is getting its 4th source book. It's gonna. I assume there's gonna be an alien invasion, right? Like that's what's going on here.
I see the word invasion.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's more Amp Year 4 types. It's more amp stuff. Like,
Hey,
there's
if you've
more
been
more
playing,
stuff.
if you've been playing Amp, like there's no surprises. Like it's what you call it.
So the thing is, the orphans have returned with the secrets of magic to fully invade the Earth. So, it's totally an invasion. Like here we go.
Yep, and it's I think this is really the first time like magic is showing up, right? Like everything.
Oh no, because the orphans were already there once before.
Oh, okay.
So that's what's going on there. Let's talk about the next one. Heavy Metal Thunder Mouse.
Ah, yes.
So if you're a Fate fan, you should just go pick up this game because it's pretty much Fate. Like there's not really a lot of things switched around
Stuart
about it.
Little meets Sons of Anarchy.
Pretty much, that's exactly what this is. The art looks great. There's a great interview that I did with Derek on the Lounge, which is already in the feed. You can go and listen to it. You can hear all about the game. Derek's an excellent writer, so I mean, and he's a good game designer too. Quite a good game designer. So I mean, I'm very curious as to see how this project plays out. I kind of want it because of that. It's got these are some of the faction stuff that Mark Diaz Truman put together for your club if you want to use it, your biker club. So
yep.
that's pretty neat. So they get you a whole bunch of NPCs to mess with when you build up your club.
Yeah, that's cool.
And like kind of like work that side of it. But then it's just mice on bikes, man.
And it is very much mice in a human world.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Right. It is not like the old Palladium mutants, mutant what is it, Roadhog's game where mutant mice are wandering the wasteland. No,
there are human beings around.
There's-
They generally ignore you. A few of them may notice you, but they're more like story. Story hooks for that kind of stuff. But like cats are terrifying. There's no scale rules. Like cats are just terrifying, right?
They're
like,
just bad.
Yeah. Like you're riding around your bikes, like riding around banana peels and stuff, and
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it is very much like Stuart Little meets Sons of Anarchy, and I guess you can play it in a couple different veins, right? Because you can play it, as I remember, I heard there's also a Gauntlet interview like a couple weeks ago. You can play it a little lighter and cuter, and you can play it like
a lot more brutal, a
like
lot more
not
dramatic,
so light and
a
cute.
lot more Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah,
and there's going to be a whole bunch of settings if they make enough cash there.
Yeah,
like,
that's cool.
Written by a bunch of other different people. There's like a Silverhawks one, possibly.
Oh God,
Right? That was what I said when he was pitching it to me. I think it's Liz from Angry Hamsters writing it.
Okay.
Like if they hit that goal, it's like Silverhawks in space. It's like the Silverhawks one. It's like mice on bikes in space on silver bikes in space.
So the Silverhawk's such a bad good show.
Phil, this last one is kind of like a you thing, really.
I think it is.
I mean, if you like samurai,
I do like samurai.
so it's 7C Hitai. I'm sure the K is silent.
I'm sure that's right.
It's the idea is it's 7C being expanded into the Pacific Rim. It's
It is, and it's John Wick.
Uh huh.
I mean, who wrote Legend of the Five Rings.
Yeah.
So I mean, kind of think the guy knows what he's
Do you
doing.
think like
in
this is his
area.
answer to to
I think
Legend of the
this
Five
is I
Rings?
couldn't get Legend of the Five Rings back, so here I'm going to make my Legend of the Five Rings.
It's funny too because it's coming out just like a few weeks after Fantasy Flight put out their beta rules for Legend of the Five Rings.
Is the Legend of the Five Rings beta rules? Is it going to use like the FFG dice?
I have no idea. I haven't looked
Because
at it
I
yet.
kind of feel like if that's the case, I'm more excited.
About the FFG dice.
Yeah, well,
I
I'm
am.
excited about that because if it's going to be kind of like Star Wars, then I'm like, let me see it.
So Hitai, it's already hit its funding goal. It's already got over 1,000 backers. It's at like 92 grand.
I had no real doubt.
Yeah,
that
right.
It would do. It's going to be
Oh,
fine.
and you can get the quick start off the Kickstarter if you want to check it out.
Right there.
for Hitai. So there you go. That's
I mean,
what's going on.
it's know.
A quick clarification from Rob.
Sure.
He says that the DIY 30, he didn't come up with it. He's just reposting it.
Yeah. I'm sorry if
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I
just
meant. I
to-
meant
just to be clear.
Rob was the one who posted the DIY 30 in the community for us. It was not. It's not exactly his. He modified some of the questions that were boring during it, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, buddy. We appreciate your assistance and your help.
Somebody's just asking me in the chat room real quickly if I'm not fond of the Star Wars dice. No, I am actually fond of the
I
Star
am
Wars.
too. I can't wait for Genesis to come out.
Yeah, and if L5R is going to use those dice, I mean, I know. I'm sure McClure's like rending his garments
Of
that
course
it's not
he is.
roll and keep.
Yeah.
But for some of us other ones, I'm okay. I roll and keep was fine, but the FFG dice are plenty funky and interesting, and we're going to do a show one day, a garage segment called "Reading the Tea Leaves," all about those kinds of mechanics. But yeah, I'm okay
We
with
should
that.
play some FFG Star Wars before we do that episode.
I'm okay with that. I've played some in the past, and I would
I've
totally
played
play
a
some
little
again.
bit myself too.
Yeah.
I would like to play more of it
I would actually. Why don't we just play Genesis?
because I want to play Star Wars.
All right, that's fine. We
I
can
like
do that
Star
as well.
Wars.
That's fine.
We could
Yeah.
play WEG Star Wars if you want. That book came out again. They re-released it. Did
Yeah,
you
but
see
that's
that?
not going to use the dice.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, we could go play old.
Oh, Jerry will go run us some FFG Star Wars.
Yeah,
we
there
just
you
go
go.
do that. I just come over and let Jerry run some FFG
Yeah,
Star
that
Wars.
seems legit.
Yeah.
Let's do some Patreon shoutouts before we get out of here.
Do.
Rob Whitaker, John Smith, Nikki Lewandowski, Merrick Blackman, Jared Rasher, who I interviewed on the Gnomecast. That'll be out soon. Robert Aducci, Craig, Eileen Barnes, and my new roommate, Stephen Farrell. So thanks.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Anything the chat room's got to say before we roll on into the after show?
No, I think we're good. And
right.
hey, patrons, spread the word because we're getting close.
30 more bucks and we shave Rob's head.
30 more
Rob,
dollars.
I mean, Bob's head. Rob already had his head shaved, so we need
Spread
to
the word. Every dollar helps.
You could be Robert too, but we just call you Bob.
Yeah.
Because Rob already got his head shaved.
Yeah, we only use Robert when we only use Robert on the Twitters, and I sometimes call him Robert.
Well, with that, thank you everyone so much for listening.
Yep. If you are free Tuesday evenings, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, 6:45 p.m. the Queen's time, you are welcome. Come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with the other listeners in the awesome chat room for life, and then ask us the occasional question.
If you cannot make it to the live show, check out our podcast each week wherever you get your podcasts, and take a listen to some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Down with D&D, Threats from Gallifrey, Advantage to Insight, Panda's Talking Games, Cypher Speak with Darcy and Troy, the Gnomecast, the Wednesday Evening Podcast All-Stars, which Avanti will be coming out sometime in the near future because Emily's editing it, and Hobbs and Friends of the OSR, which also proves that Phil was right, where I just get shows started and then I let other people edit them eventually.
Oh no. Is Hobbs editing his show yet?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
I get paid pretty well for that, so I wouldn't let him do that. Anyways, you can and should also check out some of our brother and sister podcasts. She's a Super Geek, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming and BS.
After you have positioned yourself narratively and have made your role, come leave us some feedback. You can reach us directly on email, Chris at misdirectedmark.com.
That's me.
Phil at misdirectedmark.com.
He's over there.
And Bob at misdirectedmark.com.
At the end of the table.
Check out our Facebook group. Hit us up on Twitter at misdirectedmark.
That's everyone.
At DNA Phil.
He's over there.
At Robert M. Everson.
Yeah.
At the Light 101.
Well, you can get some smooth jazz now and again.
And then hit our G Plus community where it all goes down.
If you like what we do here and on other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can and should support our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MMP. Patrons get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Pandas Talking Games bonus outtakes, D&D offerings and other offerings when we can get them, and whatever else we come up with, like Bob shaving his head as a video for you, live streamed. That'll be a thing because you can live stream on Patreon now.
So when we do it, can we can we do it as a Dungeon World move?
Sure.
When you shave Bob's head, like roll plus whatever.
Well, no, because we're going to shave his head.
Yeah, but like on a 10 plus, I shave it and it looks fantastic. And on a 7 plus, I shave it off and it's pick one.
Well, the thing is, we have to like.
I nick you.
Whoa, wait a minute.
What are you doing, man? Like we can say what
On
the
a
roll
six,
was.
on a 6 minus, Chris gets to make a hard move.
I don't want to damage Bob. I like Bob, and I would prefer.
Oh, maybe he just doesn't have a beard.
No. Shave the head, not the face.
On a
The
6
head,
minus,
the
I mean,
face.
these things can happen.
Oh my lord!
no.
Like I just like a big circle and I
Next
just,
thing he's gonna say, we're gonna set him on fire. No, we're not. There's
on
no
a 7
fire.
to 9, pick an ear.
No, I like my ears
Pick
where
an
they
ear
are.
to keep.
Well, with that, this has been a Misdirector Mark production. The media arm of Encoded Designs. The views of Phil Vecchione cutting people's ears off do not reflect the views of Misdirector Mark Productions. Mic drop.
Bleed for your art. We're out.